Hey, happy weekend, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. Hope you all are doing well so far, enjoying this first weekend of October. We have got some active weather to talk about, not just this weekend here in the Northeast and in Atlantic Canada, but next week, as the weather pattern is looking like it's going to be turning a lot more unsettled and severe weather is potentially going to be a problem again here. Let me share my screen with you all. Excuse me. And here is the trouble that lies ahead of us. We've got one large area of low pressure that's going to move into eastern Canada, bring some colder air down into the eastern US. It's already cold in the plains, and that is going to stick around for several days. But a new system will be moving into the western United States late this weekend and then dropping down into the Rockies and drawing moisture out of the Pacific and the Gulf later next week. While I don't know if we're going to have a tropical system in the Gulf, we could have kind of a hybrid system that tries to take on some tropical characteristics. But I do think we're going to see unsettled weather, lots of rain, maybe thunderstorms here over the Gulf states towards the second part of next week, heading up the East Coast, and perhaps a regional severe weather outbreak here towards the second part of next week over the plains and maybe heading into the Ohio Valley. And by next weekend, these two systems could merge and cause some bigger issues in the eastern United States, especially the Northeast, where the last thing you want to hear from somebody like me is that we're going to have some rainfall, perhaps heavy. So we're going to take a look at that in a little bit. I do want to touch on the tropics for you guys here. Philippe is no longer tropical, but the circulation with it is heading quickly northwestward towards Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Maine, and a lot of rain coming into that area along with some gusty winds. But it is no longer a tropical system, and I think a lot of us didn't expect it to be. But pretty remarkable that Tropical Storm Philippe tracked over this area of the Caribbean and then headed northward and survived for over 2 weeks and never got past 60 miles per hour. That is something that has never happened. So the remains of Philippe getting absorbed by this large low pressure system here, and that is going to track quickly in this direction, moving into New England and then leaving some disturbed weather over the eastern part of Canada and the Great Lakes here early next week. Now in the tropics, we do have another system in the Pacific just off the map, that is Lydia over here, and another developing system, Max. And neither of these is showing signs of organizing into a big time storm, but you can see there's a lot of moisture coming from the Pacific side, and as that storm moves into the west next week, all that moisture is going to be heading up in this direction and phasing with the northern branch system in here. And what we're looking at is a likely very unsettled scenario across this portion of the country. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here in the video to come here. In the eastern Atlantic, we do have an area of disturbed weather that models do show some gradual signs of development with, but not likely going to be an issue over the eastern Atlantic. So that's a quick look at the upper level pattern here. Let's take a look at the actual infrared so you can see these systems on the map, and now I can show you more of the Pacific side of things. And again, just kind of to reiterate what I just showed you, Tropical Storm Lydia over here, another flare-up which could become a depression, and then Tropical Storm Max. And right now, both of these are heading in this direction, but they're going to hit a wall here as we've got a pretty big trough in the eastern Pacific that's going to plow into the eastern US and turn around everything and send it back to Mexico and then eventually into the Gulf. So you see all of these clouds gathering strength in here. All of this moisture is eventually going to turn right around and head back into the Mexican area, into Texas, into the western and southern Gulf states. And yes, that means you too here in Florida. We're likely to see some significant rain later in the week. So big area of high pressure in place here is going to protect the Caribbean and the southeastern Gulf and the southwestern Atlantic, but everything's going to get steered around the top of that ridge into the southern and eastern United States here next week. Here's a look at the remains of Philippe, really just merging with a front at this point and bringing some gusty winds and heavy rain into Maine and Atlantic Canada. Once again, this tropical season brought to you by visitmaine.com. No, I'm not trying to put in a plug here, but it seems like everything's heading up into eastern New England, Atlantic Canada, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI. That is where all of the fun has been this tropical season, not over Louisiana or Mississippi or Alabama. So I guess that's a blessing for those of you on the central Gulf Coast that have had a lot of hurricanes in the last several years. This year, fortunately, not as bad, except in Florida and into the Carolinas. Here's a look at the GFS model. You can see our two double-barreled system here very quickly moving northwest. Again, the remains of Philippe kind of merging with this front, but all that tropical moisture heading in, a lot of gusty winds with it. And then on the cold side of this storm system, we have some snow expected here across Ontario later on this evening and especially tonight, and that moves into Quebec. Probably going to stay over the Canadian portion here, but we could see a few snowflakes in the higher terrain of West Virginia, maybe even East Tennessee here, but I don't think it's going to amount to much, just some flakes and not really any significant rain. Ahead of this low pressure system heading into Maine, a lot of rain expected here today into this evening over eastern New York, even the New York City area, Connecticut, Western Mass, Vermont, southern parts of Quebec. Locally, 1 to 3 inches of rain. Doesn't sound like a ton of rain, but with all the rain we've had here, obviously that's going to cause more issues. That will move out and drier air will circulate underneath this system here tomorrow. It'll be cooler and kind of windy. And then we're going to see great showers coming off the Great Lakes here, kind of some lake enhanced showers here right on through Tuesday and really even into Wednesday and early on Thursday. This kind of second push comes through eastern New England. We see a little bit more rain across Maine and New Brunswick, kind of a secondary low that forms. So it doesn't really get cool across this area, but it does dry out some until our next system heads in here through the middle of the week. But unfortunately, the bigger problems are probably coming here towards the weekend, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And yes, the GFS shows a little bit of Maine snow here as we get into next Friday night. Here's a look at the European, kind of the longer range features here, and you can see our big trough moving through Atlantic Canada, really Eastern Canada, not so much Atlantic Canada. We still have a ridge in place here. In between the two, lots of moisture getting sent through, and a much cooler weather pattern coming here for the southern and eastern United States. We've already had that chill across the plains, but that is heading east here this weekend, and then warming back up across the Rockies and across California for a few days. Here comes our next trough pushing into the northwest here Monday and Tuesday of next week, and that is going to reverse this system, that Lydia, that's heading out to sea, and turn it right back in. As this trough digs southeast, it pulls the moisture from Lydia northward, as well as Max. You can kind of see that creeping into Mexico here. And these two are going to try to phase into a bigger storm Thursday and Friday. And what we're going to see is all this moisture spreading eastward, more unsettled weather, quickly dropping heights, likely some severe weather here over the midsection of the country Thursday into Friday, and a lot of rain coming through the Gulf states and into the east as we get to Saturday and Sunday. And beyond that, we see more storms digging down, creating more unsettled weather across Texas and the Gulf Coast states. So the middle and second part of October look a lot wetter here across Texas, over the Gulf states, over the east, than what we've seen in the last few weeks. So we do need some rainfall here. It could be quite a bit, but Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, other than southern Arkansas, which got all that rain a few days ago, this is going to certainly help put a dent in the longer term drought we've had here the second part of summer. And it's been pretty dry here across the southeast recently, and this is going to help out with increasing that amount of water as well, while the west is actually going to turn pretty toasty here. We could see not only above average temperatures, but maybe some record high temperatures in parts of California and the west coast here as we get to about 10 days out. Here's a look at the jet stream winds, and you can see things are cranking here over the eastern U.S. today and into tomorrow. Very fast flow over the southern United States, kind of an El Nino preview, but take a look at this jet here that is getting ready to crash the party here in the West Coast for Tuesday and Wednesday. That's going to dig down, and all that strong wind flow aloft is likely going to create a setup here for potentially a significant severe weather outbreak for a couple of days, Wednesday and Thursday, maybe even into Friday farther east, as we start to see more of a spring-like weather pattern here, kind of our second season of severe weather. So I'm not exactly sure on how the details are going to play out yet, but when I see this kind of fast wind flow cutting in, it certainly has the look of something that could create severe weather and certainly could lead to some heavy rain as well here in the southern and eastern U.S. later in the week. And that pattern is going to try to repeat itself here later in the month of October. Here's a look at the European, just kind of the storm center charts, and you can see one big storm spinning over eastern Canada early next week. Then we see what's going to be Lydia, tropical storm, maybe briefly gets to a hurricane, turning northeastward towards Mexico. At the same time, low pressure drops into the northwest here as we get into Monday night and especially Tuesday and Tuesday night. And these two storms are going to try to merge into one here. We're going to see moisture out ahead of it over the Gulf states here Wednesday into Thursday. And at the same time, colder air rushing into the Rockies with snow likely to fall, rain across the northern parts of this track here from Wyoming over in Ohio. It's going to be wet and kind of cool. Then in the warm sector, we could be dealing with more significant storms from Texas up into Illinois, eastern Iowa, and across Missouri. At the same time, a concentration of rain and storms on the Gulf Coast. This is going to be Thursday night, and then the two merge into a bigger storm system Friday and Friday night. A lot of rain coming to the upper Midwest, heavier rain and maybe thunderstorms over the Appalachians down into northern Florida and eventually into the southeast. And unfortunately, a pretty big setup for rain here over the eastern United States heading into next weekend. Saturday night and Sunday, we just wash, rinse, and repeat. It could be our third straight weekend dealing with wet weather in the Northeast. And we could have localized flooding again from this storm. And the pattern stays active here. You can see more storms crashing into the Northwest, dropping down into the Rockies, pulling up moisture out of the Gulf. And here we get into the following week. And while it's a little bit too far out to get too specific, you can see we're going to see cooler weather coming down and more unsettled weather as well. Here's a look at our predicted rain for the next 24 hours. And let me back this up here. You can see heavy rain over Maine, over parts of northern New England and eastern New York State here today. This is a 24-hour period ending at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. It's going to be pretty wet across this region. I've already talked about that. I'm going to show you a little bit more. And then staying wet over eastern parts of Canada and the Great Lakes into Tuesday and Wednesday. Now we've got moisture drawing out of the Pacific and Gulf into the western Gulf states. It'll stay wet over South Texas and then southern Louisiana Wednesday night and Thursday. And then here comes that rain into Florida, into Georgia and the Carolinas later in the week from the southern system, and the rain that comes from the northern Rockies across the plains into the Great Lakes here and Ohio Valley here from the northern branch feature. And the two start to merge. And here comes our big rainstorm next weekend, Friday into the Northeast, Saturday and Sunday into New England. Significant amounts of rain, perhaps a few more inches. The European says there's going to be a lot of lightning as well. With all this moisture coming from the Pacific, we start to see scattered showers and storms over the Rockies and over the plains here starting Wednesday, over the Gulf states, heading into Thursday. And here comes what looks like it could be a significant outbreak of severe storms over Nebraska and especially Iowa, Missouri, and Kansas. This is Thursday afternoon, and then Thursday night swinging east and southward into Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri. There could be severe weather. Tough to say to what extent, how this is going to evolve just yet, but certainly it looks like that kind of a setup exists. And then we see lots of scattered showers and storms over the southeast and even over the Ohio Valley here heading into next Friday, and heavy rain, perhaps some thunderstorms into the Northeast on Saturday. Here's a look at the dam. The shorter term rainfall could be pretty significant around New York City and especially upstate into eastern New York and up into Quebec, amounts that could get over 3 inches. And then as we head into tonight and early in the day tomorrow, perhaps locally 5 or 6 inches of rain around Bar Harbor, Maine, and a few inches as well over southwestern Nova Scotia and New Brunswick here. So two big areas of heavy rain, kind of a lull between the two. And most of this rain's coming this afternoon and especially tonight across this region. And then we'll have more significant precipitation wrapping around our storm as we head to Sunday night and Monday. Here's a look at the European ensemble, shows kind of the same thing. And then we dry out, and then another round of some rain moving through Tuesday night and Wednesday. It will not be as heavy, but it will certainly be wet again. And then here comes the late week storm, and the ensemble shows significant rain from the mid-Atlantic and from the Ohio Valley heading into the Northeast in time for next weekend. Saturday and Sunday potentially could be wet. Here's a look farther south, and we're going to see a little bit of rain across Florida here tomorrow. South Florida, it'll be nice in North Florida, but here comes our push of moisture across the Gulf. And maybe a hybrid tropical storm system tries to get going here. Hybrid storm, maybe subtropical, not really fully tropical. But nonetheless, it's going to be wet. We're going to see amounts of 1 to 2 inches of rain where we do need it over the northern Gulf states here, starting Tuesday night in Texas, then Wednesday night in Louisiana, and then by Thursday across northern portions of Florida. This lifts out into the southeast, and we could see significant rain into the Carolinas by Friday and Saturday, and then things should dry out in time for the following week. Wind speeds from the remains of Philippe and our front could start ramping up pretty quickly here this afternoon. Gusts may get over 40 miles per hour at the coast of Maine, and then as high as 60 miles per hour in down east Maine, as well as in the Gulf of Maine and across Nova Scotia. The strongest of these winds looks like it'll come sometime tonight between about 10 p.m. and 1 in the morning, and then moving up into New Brunswick overnight tonight. And then winds will still be pretty gusty behind this storm system as the drier, cooler air moves in. We could have gusts of 30 to 40, but they won't be as significant as across New England. And here's a look at Atlantic Canada. The NAM doesn't go into eastern Nova Scotia. I'm sorry about that, but we see gusts of 80 to 90 kilometers per hour right around dusk tonight and continuing overnight into New Brunswick. And another surge of strong winds could affect western Nova Scotia by early tomorrow, with gusts over 100 kilometers per hour possible. Speaking of wind, our next storm ramps up and hits British Columbia and then the Northwest with gusts over 40 miles per hour for the coast. That wind will eventually expand inland and into the Rockies, where by Tuesday night, Wednesday, and Thursday, gusts could get over 50 to 60 miles per hour. And that wind spreads east into the plains here by Friday. So behind the threat of severe weather, it gets cooler and windier, and we start to see more of a fall feel across this area. And looking into the plains, we are going to see these winds ramping up here on the high plains Wednesday night and Thursday, and then across the rest of the plains into the Great Lakes Thursday night and Friday. Wind gusts of 40 to 50 miles per hour are expected, according to our recent run of the European model. And this could shift some, but we also could see gusty winds here along the Gulf Coast later next week. Now, in the eastern Atlantic, we do have an area that could develop into a depression, maybe even a tropical storm. The next name on the list would be Sean. It could be it could be something that impacts the Cabo Verdes. I don't think it's going to be anything we have to really worry about in Bermuda or anywhere west of there. Here is our area of thunderstorms, and it really is disorganized, but you can see a little bit of a spin starting here south of the Cabo Verdes. And over time, we see on the Canadian model here, low pressure likely to form as we get to about next Tuesday night and Wednesday, right here at about 30 degrees west. Now, you'll see this storm probably doesn't get to hurricane strength as it's over the cooler waters. It likely continues northward through the end of next week and then starts to turn back out to sea. The GFS tried to show it getting stuck in here, but now it doesn't even develop it. The Canadian holds on to this, but it likely recurves over the eastern Atlantic. And then we don't really have anything to stress too much about here coming out of the Cabo Verdes, really just one system at this point. Here's the European ensembles, and you can see they do show a low pressure system developing here by Wednesday and Thursday of next week. They also show some sort of low pressure coming across Mexico and forming in the Western Gulf. I don't think it's going to be anything tropical, but something we'll keep an eye on for you guys here. Certainly low pressure and certainly moisture coming here through the Gulf states. But the Caribbean's still pretty quiet. Everything really on the Mexican side and over the Eastern Atlantic. And then we've got just some junk moving through the Gulf. Really, I don't have a technical term for it, just unsettled weather at this point. So fortunately, the tropics are probably quieting down for us in the Atlantic after this next system. In the Pacific, Tropical Storm Lydia is down to 65 miles per hour, getting hit with wind shear. And we still have an area likely to form into a depression or maybe a weak storm. The next name would be Max. 90% chance that happens. Taking a look here at the infrared satellite, you can see here's Lydia, and it's getting a lot of wind shear out of the east coming. So it's not going to likely strengthen much more into a hurricane, but it is expected to turn back in this direction. Here's what I think could be Max here, and that is likely to turn into Mexico and weaken, and then that moisture may try to reform another low pressure system here in the Western Gulf by the middle of next week. So we're going to have to keep a closer eye on that. Here's Lydia, 65 miles per hour, not really a threat to land, but models do show it making a hard right here in about 2 days. And next week, threatening parts of west central Mexico, maybe the Baja of California, but likely west central Mexico here, maybe even the Riviera. And that would be Wednesday into Thursday. And yeah, it's got it tracking into the Gulf. But at that point, are we really even dealing with this circulation? I don't think so. More than likely an issue here at the opening of the Gulf of California. We still have our typhoon here, Koinu, in the South China Sea. And it is weakening a little bit, but still a Category 2. This is the Hong Kong area here and scraping the coast of China with significant amounts of wind and rain. Winds are now 110 miles per hour. Here's Hong Kong out of the cone, but we're getting some of those rain bands here around Macau. It is going to weaken, though, as it hits wind shear and drier air heading towards Hainan as a tropical storm next week. And here you can see the European ensemble guidance never really makes landfall in China, but brushes the coast and weakens significantly as it heads in this general direction. We do have a new tropical storm forming, though. This will be given the name Bolivan, and it is on the path towards the Mariana Islands and Guam, our second system to affect Guam this season, which is very rare. If you remember, Typhoon Mawar back in late May was a Category 3, and that caused all kinds of damage in Guam. This system, unfortunately, is predicted to go very close as a typhoon here on Tuesday and Tuesday night, and then could even become a super typhoon after it passes Guam and the Mariana Islands. Here's Japan on the map. It should probably recurve before it hits Japan, but could be a super typhoon here towards the middle of next week. Here's the official forecast, taking the storm track very close to Guam and Rota here, and then continuing, making the right turn towards Iwo 2 as a super typhoon. Here is the track turning everything away from Japan. The only reason I'm talking about this, aside from the impact it'll have on Guam and the fact that it will be a powerful storm, as you see, models show pressures in the 930s and 940s, which is a strong typhoon. But when we have recurving typhoons, what they often do is cause energy in the jet stream to bring colder air and more unsettled air down into the western United States, as this affects the general teleconnection. Everything that crosses the Pacific stays strong and goes east could put a big dent in the jet stream and cause bigger problems down the road later in October in the US. So we do need to watch how this evolves, because it could be a player in the US here as we get later into the month of October. So that's all I've got for you guys. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for your time today. If you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing. Please be safe if you're in Eastern Maine and New York and Western New England here in the next couple of days. And of course, I'll be watching for you guys with tropical activity in the Pacific and the Eastern Atlantic. And I'll be watching for potential severe weather and heavy rain tracking from the plains eastward here later in the upcoming week. You could also become a member of mine if you'd like, $9.99 a month. That will give you guys the ability, oh, my shirt's disappearing again, sorry about that. Give you the ability to get priority responses. It helps you support me. Any support is welcome. That allows me to kind of work upon what I've got here to provide you guys with a better offering here. It's something I'll be looking at here later this fall. And just 33 cents a day to help support me if you feel led to. No pressure, obviously, but really do appreciate y'all's time. Thank you so much. I give all the glory to God. Let me see if this works. There we go. Gonna back things up. Give all the glory to God, because he has blessed me in many ways. He has given me this avenue to communicate with you all important weather. And as a Christian man, I truly believe I am here to share the good news with you guys of what's coming. 1 Corinthians 1, 17 and 18, for Christ sent me not to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom of words, lest the cross of Christ should be made of none effect. For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved, it is the power of God. There is great power in the word of Jesus. And to those who have chosen not to believe, it sounds foolish. It makes somebody who does preach the good news sound like a moron, according to what Paul says here to the church of Corinth. However, Paul was not sent to baptize, but to share the gospel and the good news. I believe all of us who are Christians are commissioned here to share the good news, because God has given his son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross for us, to rise again, and to give us the opportunity to enter the kingdom of God and live eternally. There's nothing foolish about that. If you choose not to believe that, you may see that that is foolish. That's something that you just can't really envision happening. However, there is a Holy Spirit out there, and I truly believe that that good news is there to be shared, that God has put many of us on earth to not only accept that word, but to share it with other people. To become evangelists. And I feel that's my true calling, not to share the weather, that is important, but in the end, ultimately, it is sharing the good news of Jesus Christ, that if you do repent, you turn to God, and you accept that Jesus is here for us and with us eternally, then we will be saved. And then you no longer have to stress about what's going to happen when your time on earth is gone. 70 to 80 years is not a lot of time. It's going to fly by quickly. I'm already in my 40s, and I feel like I was just in college the other day, and things just continue to evolve here. And I know my time is precious on earth, but my time with Jesus is going to be a lot more precious. I pray that you can certainly see that. If you don't, I'm not going to judge you. This is not a Bible bashing. This is nothing like that. It is just my opportunity to share what matters most to me. I pray that it certainly is the case for you as well. And if it's not, it's okay. Look, not up to me to decide. That's the decision you need to make. But I really do pray that you do make that decision one day, that you can live eternally with Jesus in heaven. Hope you all have a great weekend. I'll chat with you again on Monday. God bless.